Got a special guest coming up next year on the Hoop Collective. Okay, welcome back to the Hoop Collective. Special guest here with me, as promised. Guy who is one of the best beat writers in the NBA. And in town because I guess the Timberwolves are here.
Yes.
I just know we talk about the Lakers. I didn't remember who they were playing. What's the difference? What does it matter who they're playing? It's Lakers. Chris Hine from the Minneapolis Star-Tribune here to cover the Lakers-Wolves series. But the reason I had him on the pod, because as if we need more Laker talk, is because he has a brand new book out on Anthony Edwards' Ant, The Incredible Journey of a Rising Star. Chris Hine, here it is right here. You can get it. Various booksellers. I've read large parts of it. Mm-hmm. And well, first off, Chris, welcome. How are you?
Thank you. It's good to be here. Appreciate it.
It sounds like a line that you would have just to sell a book, The Incredible Journey. But what I read with this book that sticks out to me is just how bleeped up Ant's childhood was. And I'm sure that story has been told in some pieces, but I don't think it's ever been told like you tell it here.
I appreciate that. It's a lot that he had to overcome to get to the NBA. His mother and his grandmother, Yvette and Shirley, were his ultimate cheerleaders growing up. And I think a lot of his personality comes from them, the confidence, the positivity that you see, that was them. That's what people told me that they were like for him in his life. They were always at his AAU tournaments, always at his youth football games. And what he overcame was at 13, they passed away from cancer about 7 months apart from each other.
And based on what you were writing in here, I'm not sure. And again, he was 13. He wasn't 23.
Right.
But I don't think he understood how sick they were. Maybe they didn't know how sick they were, or maybe they kept it from him.
I think that may be the latter.
Yeah.
And I don't even think, people close to him that, grew up with him or that kind of kept an eye on him as he was growing up. I don't think they even knew how sick his mother and grandmother were. And so it took a little bit of everybody by surprise because, I think it happened quickly as well. There wasn't much time between, like the diagnosis and when they passed. His grandmother had always battled cancer off and on. And so, for instance, in her case, people in the book tell me, well, we thought she was going to make it through because that's what she always did.
Yeah.
And it just didn't work out that particular time. So at 13 years old, he loses, the two rocks in his life.
Yeah.
And obviously his siblings, his three older siblings, were a big part in getting him through that. And, he refers to his sister Antoinette, who, he lived with for a time as, one of the backbones of the family and to help them get through it. And there was also this community of people who you will meet in the book that really helped Ant kind of get to the finish line.
It was a community because he was kind of bouncing around.
Yes.
Like nobody kind of knew what to do with him. I mean, it seems like he was well-liked. He was a well-liked kid because, look at his personality. I get it. But it wasn't like, oh, this is a basketball star. Like also the other thing is like, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, we got to take care of this kid. He's a basketball star.
At 13 years old, he was not a basketball prodigy. He was not a high-ranked recruit. He was always very good at basketball, and he played AAU, high-level AAU from a young age, but he was coming off the bench in early AAU days, and everybody thought football was going to be his athletic future.
Too.
Right? I mean, you look up some of his youth highlights on YouTube, they're still up there. I compared him to like a young Derrick Henry because he just towered over people, and he was fast, and he would truck them when he was running down the field. Absolutely. He was a great youth football player. But that's where everybody thought his future was going to be. Basketball was, I don't want to just say something he did, but it kind of was. And so his life was kind of a constant toggle of football, basketball, and a lot of the same families were involved in his life, friends of his that he played football with or AAU basketball with. And so he got close to these families and they always kind of kept an eye out for him. One of the guys you see in the Netflix documentary Starting Five, his uncle Drew, Drew's been in Ant's life since he was like 6-7 years old. And, his son played football with Ant. And then Drew drove Ant an hour each way to Holy Spirit High School in the Buckhead area of Atlanta through harrowing Atlanta traffic every day,
Right.
trying to get Anthony Edwards out of bed after playing video games till 2 a.m.
Now
the
that
night
I can
before.
believe about Ant. That's the part of Ant's story I can see.
That is something that he's always done. Video games always been a big part of his life. But somebody like Drew was instrumental in Ant's life and making sure that he had a ride, that he had a place to stay, that he was getting from point A to point B, that he needed a ride. If he needed a ride to the gym, needed a ride to school. And there were a lot of people like that who you'll meet in the book. So the book is not just Ant's story, but it's a story of all these people that are still in his life, still play an important role in his life.
He's got a commercial out right now where I'm not sure
his
who
best friend Nick Maddox,
where he's obviously featuring his best friend.
Yep.
In the commercial, singing in the car like to lift him up. So like
and personally, I kind of like seeing that because the way that Nick told me that they met and bonded, and it's in the book, is they were driving home they went to the same high school, Holy Spirit. They were driving home one day and they bonded over music, and specifically the Temptation song, Just My Imagination, which is an old school song.
This is a surprise. This is this is what should be playing when he's like being introduced.
Right. Exactly. So you wouldn't expect that, like an old school song from like 1971 was something that these two teenagers in Atlanta in the year 2018 or whatever it was end up becoming best friends. But that was kind of the moment he said that they became friends. And that's another thing about Ant. He has an old soul, whether it's older music or older TV shows, but also in just the way that he can read people and the way that he can read a room. And he's always had this innate sense of who's had his best interests at heart and who hasn't. Mm-hmm. And really from 13, 14, 15,
he lost his mom and grandmother.
You had to grow up really fast. Yeah. So you had to have an innate sense of who really was looking out for you. And if you notice the people that he keeps close, it's a lot of those same people that are still close to him today that he trusts. And there's not a lot of new people that enter that orbit.
Well, I believe that. That's what, good NBA guys do.
Yeah.
So you can read all about Ant Edwards in this book. Just like that insight you're not getting on an average. By the way, you don't mind my favorite things about Ant is his use in interviews of the word dope. He just used it.
Just that word, not any other word or anything. That's dope.
He uses some other words, but like, and I'm almost not making a joke here. Like when he gets a question that sometimes he just says, well, that's dope.
Yeah.
Hey, like you're getting disrespected. That's dope. Hey, what'd you think about that incredible 75-point game? It was dope. Like, but in a way, I actually think it's kind of shrewd because it like sort of knocks people off. Like, where do you go from there? Like, it's dope. Right. It's dope.
Mm-hmm. I'll say we had a couple weeks ago when they played Denver and Jokic went for 61 in that double overtime game. Ant had played,
but the Wolves won.
The Wolves won, yeah, and Ant and Jokic had squared off 24 times over the last 3 years between playoffs and even the Olympics, international play. He would give something along those lines whenever you would ask Ant about Jokic, but the way that he spoke about Jokic after that 60-point game, I had never really heard him talk about Jokic in that way before, just almost awestruck. And he had never really been that way before, but coming off of that night, even after the Wolves win, he just couldn't believe what he had just seen. So sometimes you get him out of that's dope. And that's when you really know, like, oh, he was really awestruck, really impressed with somebody. And he was, for instance, that night in Denver.
What do you think we can expect to see from Ant in this series with the Lakers? I have to assume that they're planning on double teaming him.
Coming into this, I think it's not just double teams, but I think it's going to be a mixture of things. That's what the Wolves are getting ready for, whether it's doubling him, whether it's, high wall, we'll see what kind of coverages JJ Redick and how the Lakers personnel wants to mix it up. But I think just the buzz around Minnesota is this is going to be the ultimate test of Anthony Edwards and his smarts as a basketball player, I think, and the ability to figure out what the Lakers are doing, to see the game 2-3 steps ahead. He's always had this innate sense and has stepped up huge in the playoffs each of the last 3 years.
For sure.
He plays well. Even when the Wolves lose a series, he tends to play really well. This I think is going to test him in a different way. And mentally, how will he process the game? And will he fight the urge to want to take over? Will he fight the urge to want to shoot a step back three with two guys in his face? You know, sometimes that urge does take over for him, especially late in games. So this is going to be about Anthony Edwards and how much really he's learned the game 5 years into his career. I think that's where this series is headed for him.
That's a great point. And the thing about it is the Lakers, even though Ant led the league in threes this year, because obviously he has really developed his shot. I think if we'd have said that in his second season, we would never believe that, because that shot was they wanted him to take threes back then.
They did. And that's coming into the NBA. That was one of the knocks on him too. I think he was under 30%